If you thought you knew Tiffany Haddish's story, think again, because what she just revealed might be the final crack in Tyler Perry's carefully constructed empire. For years, he's been praised as a trailblazer, a powerhouse director who built a legacy from nothing. But behind the smiles, the gospel music, and the family-friendly messages, something much darker may have been hiding. And Tiffany. She's done being quiet. From being unpaid, blackballed, and betrayed, her story isn't just about survival. It's about exposing what she calls a pattern of silence and manipulation in Hollywood. What she reveals will not only shock you, it might change how you see Tyler Perry forever. And by the end of this video, you'll realize silence has a cost. It started with a look, a subtle shift in Tiffany Haddish's tone that longtime fans noticed immediately. In a late-night video posted online, she wasn't cracking jokes. There was no punchline. Her eyes were heavy, her voice low, and her words came out like a woman who had reached her limit. "I'm tired of being nice," she said with a quiet fire that made everyone stop scrolling. It wasn't staged. It wasn't funny. It was raw. "Don't ask me to work for free," she added. "I don't even ask people to work for free." It was a statement that hit harder than any stand-up set she'd ever done. The question on everyone's mind was, who was she talking about? At first, some fans thought maybe she was talking about her team, or toxic friends, or maybe even just venting from burnout. But then, like puzzle pieces snapping together, the real story started to take shape. Tiffany had been working in the shadows of some of Hollywood's biggest names for years, and among them, none had a bigger footprint or reputation for lifting up black talent than Tyler Perry. But if you listened closely to her words, they weren't just about being overworked. They were about being undervalued, discarded. And that's when the speculation turned into something more serious. People started asking, had Tyler Perry done her dirty? The timeline only made things more suspicious. Haddish's rant came at a time when Perry was already facing public scrutiny over how he treats actors, writers, and collaborators. And Tiffany's frustration didn't come out of nowhere. It felt like it had been simmering for years. "If a man looks too good to be true, he is," she said with a knowing glare, as if the audience was finally being invited to see the truth she'd been holding back. Fans combed through her old interviews, dug up red carpet moments, and replayed clips where she praised Perry in the past. But now, those moments looked different. They looked like the carefully measured words of someone who was trying to protect a relationship until she couldn't anymore. This wasn't some tabloid spat. This was a woman, finally fed up, peeling back the curtain on what it means to be black, female, and rising in a business that promises everything, but often delivers heartbreak. Haddish wasn't accusing anyone directly, yet, but every sentence hinted at betrayal. And with each passing day, it became more and more clear that this wasn't about one late payment or one bad experience. This was the first crack in something much, much bigger. And what she said next proved just how deep the damage went. Before Tiffany Haddish became a household name, before the red carpets, the Netflix deals, the blockbuster hits, she was grinding, hustling for scraps, sleeping in her car, taking background roles, and showing up on set for pennies just to keep her dream alive. So when she got the chance to work on a small, independent film early in her career, she took it without hesitation. It wasn't glamorous, and the paycheck, just $1,200. Not life-changing, but it meant something. It was supposed to be the first of many steps out of poverty, but that check never came. "They never paid me a dime," she said, and she wasn't joking. There was no excuse, no apology, no back-end royalty, nothing, just silence, and that stung. Not just because she needed the money badly, but because of who was involved behind the scenes. It was someone she looked up to, someone she trusted, someone with the power to change her life. That person? Tyler Perry. At the time, Haddish didn't name names, but her words were laced with resentment. It wasn't random. It felt calculated. She was used, then left behind. And to her, it was a sign of a larger problem. How black women in Hollywood are asked to smile, show up, do the work, and stay silent when the system fails them. That $1,200 might sound small to an industry giant, but to a struggling actress, it's groceries, rent, gas. It's the difference between hope and despair. I was in a non-union film, she explained, so there was nothing I could do. Legally maybe, but morally, that silence said everything. Even years later, with a hit movie under her belt and a list of accolades to match, Haddish didn't forget. That unpaid debt became a symbol, a warning. It wasn't just about the money, it was about respect, about being seen, about how easy it is to take advantage of someone when they have no power and no voice. And now that she has both, she's using them. The industry likes to celebrate its success stories, the rags to riches tales that make for great press. But what it doesn't show is what those stories often cost. For Tiffany, it cost her trust. And it raised a chilling question. If someone like Tyler Perry could look past that injustice, how many others has he ignored? But this wasn't even the biggest betrayal, because what came next nearly destroyed her career, and the silence from the man she once admired cut deeper than any unpaid check ever could. For years, Tiffany Haddish had clawed her way up from nothing through foster care, homelessness, and the unspoken rules of an industry that doesn't forgive mistakes, especially if you're a black woman with a voice. And just when it seemed like she was finally breaking through, the walls came crashing down. It started with a lawsuit, one that shocked Hollywood. In 2022, Tiffany Haddish and fellow comedian Aries Spears were accused of something unthinkable: misconduct involving two minors. The allegations were graphic, devastating, and spread online like wildfire. Headlines ran with it. Social media turned cold. Sponsors disappeared. Jobs evaporated overnight. She had barely enough time to catch her breath, let alone fight back. And behind the scenes, the silence was deafening. But the part that hit the hardest? Tyler Perry. A man who once called her family. A man she had publicly supported, uplifted, and credited as one of the few who opened doors for her. When everything fell apart, she waited, maybe for a phone call, a message, a word of support, but nothing came, not even a whisper. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed. The claims were withdrawn. She was legally cleared, but by then the damage was done. People had already made up their minds. The industry moved on without her. And Tyler? He stayed far away, like she was a stain he didn't want near his brand. She wasn't just fighting the lawsuit, she was fighting to get her name, her dignity, and her career back. In a tearful interview, Haddish admitted, "I lost everything, all my gigs, gone." She wasn't exaggerating. Shows she was booked for vanished from the schedule. No red carpets, no casting calls, just silence. And in that silence, she realized something terrifying. The people who claim to support you when you're rising are often the first to vanish when you're falling. What hurt wasn't just the betrayal, it was the hypocrisy. Tyler Perry had built a public image on second chances, on lifting up the fallen, on standing by the misunderstood. But when it came to Tiffany, there was no defense, no interview, no Instagram post, not even a private message. To Tiffany, it wasn't just abandonment, it was erasure. The very people who had helped her rise now acted like she never existed. And for an actress who had spent her life clawing for visibility, that silence screamed louder than anything. But she wasn't alone, because while she was fighting for her voice, another woman was already calling out Tyler Perry for the exact same pattern. A woman who had been fighting the same silent war for over a decade. And she wasn't done talking. They say silence speaks louder than words. And in Hollywood, it can be deafening. As Tiffany Haddish watched her career crumble under the weight of accusations that were later dismissed, she kept looking for something. Not a grand gesture, not a PR stunt, just a simple acknowledgement from someone she once considered a mentor. But Tyler Perry, he said nothing. He did nothing. He vanished. And maybe that's what hurt the most. For years, Perry had positioned himself as a champion of black voices, especially black women. He created roles for the overlooked, platforms for the unheard. To many, he was a symbol of what was possible. A man who came from nothing and built an empire through faith, hustle, and loyalty. But in Haddish's darkest hour, there was no loyalty, no outreach, no "I believe in you," not even a quiet show of support behind the scenes. It wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was a revelation. Tiffany had stood by him publicly. She'd laughed at his jokes, promoted his films, played her part in the carefully curated image of solidarity. And when she needed even a fraction of that support in return, he wasn't there. Not in a tweet, not in a phone call, Not in a single interview. Even after the lawsuit was dropped and the headlines moved on, Perry stayed quiet, as if acknowledging her would somehow contaminate his brand, as if her name was a risk, not a person. It was a silence that mirrored what so many other black actresses had experienced in the industry. The gutting realization that support is conditional, that allyship comes with a price tag, and if you're not marketable anymore, if you've been accused, even falsely, you're disposable. And she wasn't the only one who noticed, because while Tiffany Haddish was picking up the pieces, another voice, older, battle-scarred, and just as fierce, was preparing to speak again, a woman who'd spent over a decade warning the world about this very pattern, a woman who had already tried to hold Tyler Perry accountable and been buried for it. Her name, Monique, and she was done being quiet too. Tiffany Haddish's story wasn't an isolated case. For years, another woman had been sounding the alarm, loudly, painfully, and often alone. Monique, the Oscar-winning actress who went from Hollywood royalty to industry exile after refusing to play the game. And the man at the center of her fight? Tyler Perry. Back in 2010, after her powerful performance in Precious, Monique was expected to campaign for award season, but she refused to do unpaid press. That's when the doors started closing. And in 2015, she made it public. She'd been blackballed. By who? Oprah, Lee Daniels, Tyler Perry. She named them outright, and she never took it back. Years later, standing on the Apollo stage, she dropped the word blackballed for something even more brutal. I was whiteballed, she said, by some black men with no balls. And she wasn't joking. Her voice trembled with rage, but her words were razor sharp. She accused Perry of using black talent when it served him, and discarding them when it didn't. And now, watching Tiffany Haddish go through the same silence, the same abandonment, Monique's words felt prophetic, the same pattern, the same pain, the same man at the center. But Monique wasn't done, and this time, more people were finally listening. Tyler Perry's image has always been polished, family values, empowerment, and self-made success. But behind that curtain, the stories don't always match the branding. In 2008, during the height of his sitcom House of Pain, something unexpected happened. 4 black writers who had helped craft over 100 episodes were suddenly fired. Why? Because they asked for union contracts. They weren't demanding millions. They simply wanted the same rights as other TV writers, fair pay, health care, pension. But instead of negotiating, Perry let them go. No warning. No compromise, just cut off. When pressed, Perry claimed he didn't need them because he wrote everything himself. It sounded impressive, but to the writing community, it sounded like control. Then came more fallout. In 2015, major actors unions, SAG-AFTRA and Actors Equity, banned their members from working on one of his touring stage plays. Why? Perry's production company refused to sign standard union agreements. Once again, the message was clear. If you want benefits, protections, or fairness, you're out. To some, Perry's moves looked like business efficiency. To others, it looked like exploitation hidden behind a smile. And for people like Tiffany Haddish, it raised a dangerous question. If this is how he treats the people behind the camera, how does he treat the people in front of it? And that's when an entirely different name entered the story. A church, a contract, and a bunk bed that nearly changed Tiffany's life forever. Just when you thought Tiffany Haddish's journey couldn't get more intense, enter Scientology. It sounds like fiction, but this was her real life. At one point, Tiffany wasn't just broke. She was homeless, alone, and desperate. She'd sleep in her car, show up on sets as an unpaid extra. No safety net, no family to fall back on. And that's when they found her. Someone approached her from the Church of Scientology. They offered her shelter, a bed, a roof over her head. And for a woman with nowhere to go, it felt like salvation. They said they'd pay me $50 a month and give me a place to stay, Tiffany recalled. All she had to do was sign a contract, one that spanned, literally, 1 billion years. She signed it. She didn't fully understand what she was getting into. She was vulnerable, hungry, and exhausted. But things quickly turned strange. They took her to a facility filled with bunk beds, tight, cramped, cold. And for Tiffany, that was the line. "I don't do bunk beds," she said. "That's how you get me to lose my temper." She threw a fit. They tore up the contract. She was out. But what raised more eyebrows? She claimed the people trying to recruit her had connections to actress Jada Pinkett Smith, another figure long rumored to have ties to Scientology. It was a web of influence, silence, and hidden agendas, one that, according to Tiffany, preyed on desperate artists looking for a break. This wasn't just about religion, it was about control, and if she hadn't walked away, her entire career and life might have taken a very different, darker path. But Tiffany wasn't done running into powerful enemies, because just when she thought she had Hollywood figured out, another storm was waiting, this time from a fellow comedian who had a mic, a stage, and zero filter. Tiffany Haddish had faced silence from her mentors and manipulation from power players, but the next blow came from someone unexpected, and this time, it wasn't quiet. It was loud, public, and personal. Cat Williams. Known for his raw honesty and cutting humor, Williams didn't hold back when he appeared on the Frank and Wanda radio show. Fresh off an Emmy win, he turned the spotlight on Tiffany and lit a match. "She doesn't write her own jokes," he said. "She hasn't done a special. She hasn't even proven she's funny." It was brutal, and it wasn't vague. He questioned how Tiffany rose so quickly in an industry that often makes people grind for years. "You can't name your favorite Tiffany Haddish joke," he said, "because there ain't one." And just like that, he planted a seed of doubt in millions of listeners. He even went further, mocking Girls Trip, the movie that launched her career. "Do you think she wrote that?" he scoffed. "Goofball, that was already a script. They just handed it to her." For Haddish, who had spent her entire life proving she belonged in the spotlight, it was another punch. And this time, it came from someone in her own arena. To fans, it raised a painful question. Was Tiffany being lifted up because of talent, or because she was safe, marketable, and easy to control? The industry watched, social media exploded, but Tiffany stayed mostly quiet, because she knew the real fight was never on a comedy stage. It was behind closed doors, in meetings she was never invited to, in decisions made without her. And while Cat Williams attacked her credibility, what happened next threatened to take away her entire career. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, they did. On the morning after Thanksgiving, Tiffany Haddish was arrested. Again. Witnesses found her Tesla stopped in the middle of Beverly Drive. She was asleep behind the wheel. Police responded quickly, and by 5:45 a.m., she was in custody, suspected of driving under the influence. Hours earlier, she had performed at the Laugh Factory's annual charity event, serving food to those in need. But by sunrise, her mugshot was already circulating. It wasn't her first time. In 2022, she had already faced another DUI in Georgia. That time, she tried to play it off with humor, joked about getting a man in uniform sent by God. But this time, the laughter didn't land. Something was different. Shortly after the arrest, Tiffany took to Instagram, this time not to entertain, but to speak. For nearly 22 minutes, she let the world see what fame rarely shows: exhaustion, frustration, and pain. She talked about betrayal from people close to her, about being used, about working for free for people who never thanked her. "Don't ask me to be nice anymore," she warned. "I'm done." She didn't name names, but her target felt clear. This wasn't a meltdown. It was a breaking point. The product of years of being overlooked, underpaid, overbooked, and left to pick up the pieces every time someone else let her fall. Fans in the comments pleaded for her to get help. Some blamed Hollywood, others blamed Tyler Perry, but the message was the same. Something was deeply wrong. She later told Entertainment Tonight that the Tesla had parked itself and she'd simply fallen asleep. But even that explanation couldn't mask the deeper truth. Tiffany Haddish was spiraling. The pressure, the silence, the betrayals, it was all becoming too much. But this wasn't just a personal crisis. It was a signal, a warning flare that behind the glitz and glamour, even the brightest stars can fall. And as the dust settled, one thing became clear. Hollywood hadn't just forgotten Tiffany Haddish. It had broken her, and she was done pretending everything was fine. But the story wasn't over yet, because the cracks in her career were starting to reveal something bigger, a lie Hollywood had been selling for years. And with one final spark, it was all about to unravel. Tiffany Haddish's story isn't just about a lawsuit, a breakdown, or one silent mentor. It's about an industry that builds its stars, then vanishes when they need saving. The silence from Tyler Perry wasn't just personal, it was symbolic. A man celebrated for uplifting voices, turning his back when it truly mattered. And now the mask is slipping. More voices are speaking out, more stories are surfacing, and what once looked like a dream built on faith and family might be something else entirely. This isn't just Tiffany's fight anymore, it's a reckoning. Because the truth always comes out, and Hollywood's shiny lie, it's starting to crack.